Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Energy costs rose 11% just in the month of March. Groceries jumped 1.5%. Soaring inflation is hitting Americans hard.
Well, two leading indicators show that inflation is at its highest in 40 years. This comes as the war in Ukraine is threatening the global food supply. Dale Hurd reports.
Most of us don't remember inflation this bad, and for good reason. It hasn't been this severe since the 1980s.
Everything's going up at least $1, which, adds up, of course, especially when, you have kids and got to get groceries.
On Tuesday, the Labor Department announced consumer prices jumped 8.5% in March, the fastest clip since 1981. Then Wednesday, it was reported that wholesale prices, the Producer Price Index, climbed 11.2% from a year ago.
The big driver was the gasoline prices, which were up 18% month over month.
Economist Stephen Skanke has worked for multiple administrations. He says energy and Russia's war on Ukraine have literally fueled our inflation.
The United States in 2019 was a net exporter of oil. And we discovered after the invasion that we were actually importing Russian oil. And that creates a problem.
Energy prices are up 36% compared to a year ago. That plus pandemic-induced supply shortages have whiplashed the U.S. economy and left many families in a lurch.
I come to the food bank every week because they have fresh vegetables and stuff that I can't necessarily afford.
Skanke sees some bright spots. Core prices show supply chain issues are beginning to improve, and business investment is growing. Worldwide, however, there's little encouragement. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says 275 million people face acute food insecurity.
I am deeply concerned about the impact of Russia's war on food prices and supply, particularly on poor populations who spend a larger share of their income on food.
In Washington next week, the World Bank and IMF will look at these food shortages and inflation and how they could worsen global political unrest. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, get ready for more high prices. I don't see this slacking off anytime soon. The taking Russian oil off the market is absolutely going to increase the price of oil, price of natural gas. So as energy costs increase, that gets passed along the line because everything is dependent on transportation to get delivered to your store. So if transportation costs are going up because fuel costs are going up, then prices are going to go up. Add to that, Ukraine is the largest producer, one of the largest producers of red wheat in the world. And so you're going to have a wheat shortage, and that's going to increase the price of wheat. And that affects a lot of food prices. So this isn't going away anytime soon. Add to it what our federal government is doing, which is printing a whole bunch of money and trying to add even more stimulus to the American economy because of the pandemic. Larry Summers warned them last summer. Here's a Democrat warning Democrats, don't do this. You're going to add to inflation. They said, no, that's not, you don't understand economics, and we know what we're doing. And they passed the stimulus package, and here we are with a lot of inflation, just as he predicted. So are we going to see the politics take over? And the Republicans are absolutely going to blame the Democrats for it, and they're going to blame energy policy for it. The Democrats are going to blame big oil, and they're going to blame Russia. They're going to try to, pass the buck, who's really responsible. But at the end of the day, it's you and I that have to pay the higher prices. Now, I know enough about economics to know high prices, the cure for high prices is high prices. If you try to get the government involved, they're just going to mess that up. Demand is already softening, so we'll see it. It's going to take some time for this to flow through. But again, the cure for high prices is high prices. If they're there long enough, demand always slacks off. The cure for low prices is low prices because low prices increase demand. So this isn't a hopeful message. We're going to have inflation for some time. And my biggest concern is will it turn into recession? So you have inflation plus a recession in the economy. And that's something I lived through in the 1970s. And are we going to see that again? But if you're looking for a political solution, if you hear a politician trying to make political points out of this, please shut them off, because the politics is really not the issue. Does it contribute a little bit to the energy policy? Yes, but there are actually other bigger factors at stake. In other news, a global ministry with a huge following is now suffering serious setbacks. Ephraim Graham has more on that story from our CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, plagued by leadership scandals and the loss of American churches, Hillsong has taken a string of hits this year. Many are wondering what's next and how the Lord will work in the crisis. Senior National Affairs correspondent Heather Sells has our report.
In recent weeks, Hillsong has lost its founder and global leader, many of its American church campuses, and its reputation as a global ministry leader that many churches have sought to emulate.
We see churches all over the world mimicking Hillsong style and saying, we want some of what they have.
Author Caitlin Beatty has long followed Hillsong's rise and style, starting almost 40 years ago as a tiny Australian church. It is spread to 5 continents with churches in 30 countries, plus a powerhouse music ministry.
What a beautiful night it is.
They understand that a lot of us, especially young people, respond to great music, to beautiful light design, to a sense that you can go into a church and it feels more like a nightclub.
Dr. Corney Becker, Dean of the Regent School of Divinity, says the combination of cultural savvy, extraordinary worship, and gospel presentation all played a key role.
The clarity of the gospel that they have proclaimed, very easy for people to understand, easy to follow.
Recently, however, Hillsong has struggled. In 2020, it fired New York City pastor Carl Lentz, who later confessed to marital infidelity. The church promised an investigation for a, quote, fresh start. Then this year,
I've agreed to step aside from all ministry responsibilities.
Founder Brian Houston stepped down. First came charges that he concealed evidence regarding his father's child sex offenses, and more recently, he admitted inappropriate behavior with women and problems with alcohol. In March, Hillsong's Phoenix pastor left.
I never thought I would be standing here today.
Taking with him churches in Las Vegas and Tucson. Other branches in Kansas City and Atlanta have separated from the overall organization.
People don't come to church for scandal. They come to church to have a safe place.
The question now, what can be learned from Hillsong's rise and fall?
I think it's a lesson for any Christian ministry to be wary of building ministries or churches' success around the charisma of one particular person.
I'm deeply concerned that because this is played out on television in the public sphere, that the message of redemption is lost.
Becker says there's no question abuse victims must be prioritized and that pastors who fail must step down. He also wants a watching world to see grace for those who've done wrong and hear an apology.
For those that are watching the public failures of Christian leaders, I want to say to them that we are sorry. I want to say to them, when we fail in ways like this, we want to let you know that this is not Christ, that He is better, that He is greater.
A timely message as Easter approaches. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Turning overseas now to Russia's war on Ukraine. Ukrainian forces say they seriously damaged the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet with cruise missiles, dealing a potentially major setback to Moscow's forces, still trying to regroup for a renewed offensive in eastern Ukraine. Russia said the crew of the Moskva, seen here in file, was forced to evacuate after a fire overnight, but Russia did not acknowledge an attack. This comes after President Joe Biden approved $800 million in new military assistance to Kyiv. He said weapons from the West have sustained Ukraine's fight so far, and, quote, "We cannot rest now." The U.S. president also, for the first time, called Russia's atrocities genocide.
I called it genocide because it's become clearer and clearer that Putin is just trying to wipe out the idea of even being able to be a Ukrainian.
More than 4.5 million Ukrainians have fled the assault on their country. Neighboring Poland has taken in more than half of those refugees, where towns along the border are opening their arms to help. CBN's Wendy Griffith reports now from Poland.
While one neighboring country tries to take these Ukrainians' homeland by force, Poland is opening its arms to those escaping the terror.
Here in the border town of Przemyśl, many refugees are finding comfort and shelter in the local church.
Since the war began some 6 weeks ago, Pastor Czesław of the Nazareth Church has seen hundreds of refugees pass through his doors.
We weren't prepared. It's just the needs appeared. So I believe that God prepared us anyway, and we see the big need, so we respond to the needs.
Several areas, including the main sanctuary, now serve as bedrooms for displaced families, while this spacious kitchen, equipped with a cappuccino maker, provides refugees like Anya and her 12-year-old daughter a small reminder of home.
We have cold water, we have separate rooms, we have bedrooms. People are very nice.
Anya and her daughter left eastern Ukraine 3 weeks ago at the urging of her husband, who stayed behind to fight. They're living here until they get their visas to England.
We're in constant contact with our friends from Kharkiv, and they couldn't get out of the Kharkiv because it was constant bombing, and they were like shooting even cars who were trying to leave.
Here at the Operation Blessing tent, many more come through to receive hot drinks, blankets, and enjoy a place for their children to play. If they have nowhere to go, that's where OB and Pastor Czesław work together.
Several occasions we made a phone call to this pastor, and he showed up not even like 40 minutes later with his van and with his team to bring people to the church where they could spend the night. And he's very, very helpful and accommodating, and the church is turned into a refugee center, as you've seen.
OB also provides them with hygiene kits and other relief items. Anya, a Polish native working with Operation Blessing, says helping these people is what Jesus would do.
Can you imagine if Jesus crossing the border? What would you do, yeah? Would you do everything what you can to invite him, to feed him, to keep him warm, to give him clothes if he needs, and help him, yeah, and love him, yes, because he loves us so much that we should share this love with other people.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, on the Polish-Ukrainian border.
We must share that love. Gordon?
Yeah, the words of Jesus, whatever you do to the least of these, my brethren, you do also unto me. If you want to be a part of helping the refugees, just give us a call, 1-800-700-7000. There's an Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund you can give to. We're supporting Orphans Promise Centers throughout Ukraine and in the countries surrounding. You're part of that wonderful relief effort in Poland. It's real easy. All you have to do is call, or you can write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463, and just put Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of a check, or you can text OB Crisis to 71777. Either way, do it now. Be a part of helping those in need. 1-800-700-7000.